I'm your host, Keith Chitaka. In the next hour, we'll be diving into all matters related to the anti-money laundering, short AML, with specific but not exclusive focus on the microfinance industry. Joining us today are two experts in this field, Arno Bosch and Vikas That. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Keith.
AML has become a hot topic, particularly in South Africa. And when we were placed on the FATF grey list in 2023, raising the stakes for regulatory compliance and institutional accountability. Before we dive in, a quick housekeeping note. Please drop your questions into the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to get to most of them if we can closer to the end of our session. This session is being recorded and we'll be sharing a link post the webinar. To kick things off, let's unpack the basics and the implications of South Africa's grey listing. Arno.
Keith, thank you. So maybe let's start possibly from the beginning, and that is FATF, you've mentioned it. That's the Financial Action Task Force. It was established in the late 1980s, 89, I think, by the G7 countries. And the aim of that was essentially to put forth standards, international standards to combat money laundering and terrorist funding. South Africa became a member in 2003. Currently, there's about 39 members. So what does that mean? That means that the member countries are essentially looking after the financial sector and the financial market, ensuring that there's minimal engagement when it comes to money laundering and terrorist funding. So every country and every member country has an obligation to conform to that standards. So unfortunately, we had a bit of a I don't want to say running, but the FATF did an investigation into South Africa and to see where we are with regards to that standards, and the reality is we fell short. Now we have an opportunity to get out of the grey listing. The unfortunate thing is, a grey listing means that we are now under scrutiny. In order to be safe for financial investment and to be regarded as having sound financial systems and so on in place, grey listing doesn't help us in that regard. So currently we're in a fight to get off the grey list, because it will mean a great deal for the country if we get off as far as investment's concerned. And that is also why the likes of FIC is now active. They are the custodian. They've been created in terms of FICA. So very, very important that all accountable institutions conform and do their bit to ensure that South Africa ultimately gets off the grey list. Very important.
No, thanks for that. So in a world where compliance costs are rising, some may question the value of investing in it. What is the real cost of non-compliance?
And we get this a lot and quite often, and unfortunately in general, when it comes to compliance, a lot of the knee-jerk reaction is put my head in the sand. I'm too small. I'm not going to get caught out. Why would they bother about my business? But that's not the right thing to do. There is this pressure on South Africa and on our regulators to get us off the grey list. One of the issues that's been identified is the lack of enforcement and lack of investigations in that space. I thought it good last night. The nice thing about the FIC, was the Financial Intelligence Center, let's call them the watchdog in the space, is they have a very active website. They publish everything. So-called PCCs, which is public compliance commentary and directives and guidance notes. But what they also publish is the sanctions they issue and the penalties. And I thought it probably a bit off script, but I went for intersake onto the website last night. And because we're going to touch on these things later, I thought it would be a good idea to show the public and the accountable institutions to say, and these are small companies, they're small entities, but maybe just to to list as an example or to mention as example what the regulators are capable of doing to your business when you have opted not to comply. And if you don't mind, Keith, I'm going to just highlight a few of the non-compliance. Sorry, I'm going blind, so I'm going to need to put on my phone. My glasses. So this was recently issued. Financial Sector Conduct Authority, FSCA, is satisfied that so-and-so financial services have not complied with its FICA requirements. So they list the nature of the alleged non-compliance, and it starts with the risk management and compliance program, which we're gonna discuss quite a bit. So it says in terms of Section 42, an accountable institution must develop, document, maintain, and implement this program. Then it says the Act states that the RMCP must enable accountable institutions to identify, assess, monitor, mitigate, and manage risks. And we'll get to that a bit later as well. Then it goes on to say the findings. At the time of the inspection, so-and-so had a copy of the risk and compliance, their risk RMCP. Now, I think it's pertinent to note that this is actually a company that had an RMCP. You'd be quite shocked to know how many accountable institutions doesn't yet have an RMCP or have not yet registered with the FIC, and I think we're going to touch on that as well. The risk matrix was found to be inadequate. Then it goes on about the lack of the risk matrix and where it falls short. The RMCP does not make provision for the manner in which the institution determines if a person or prospective client is in the process of establishing a business relationship or whether it's a single transaction, and we'll get to that as well. But it goes on, and it's very focused on your RMCP, which we'll touch on later. RMCP silent about training, RMCP silent about where the RMCP is available to staff. RMCP is silent about customer due diligence, which we'll touch on as well. RMCP insufficient when it comes to screening your PEP and your PIPs and the screening against a TFS F list. But the most important thing I thought of maybe getting to is the fines, the administrative penalties. Now, this is a small company. So these are pages and pages of non-compliance. And bear in mind, this is at least a company that tried to be compliant. They have an RMCP, they've registered with the FIC. So I'll get to the administrative sanctions issued. There's a directive to remediate all the deficiencies. Then it says you need to update your RMCP in this and this and that respect. And then it goes on to say financial penalty for non-compliance with Section 42(1). 42 deals with your RMCP requirements, 200,000 Rand. Financial penalty of 100,000 Rand for non-compliance with Section 43. Financial penalty of another 300,000 for non-compliance with 28. Directed to pay the 300,000 Rand immediately, and the rest they're capable of paying off over monthly installments. The reality is, the unfortunate thing is people do not understand that these are entities that at least try to be compliant. We've had many instances, and it's very easy for the FIC because of supervisory bodies, the NCR, the FSCA, the Reserve Bank, to say, we want to know who are the accountable institutions you are looking after. We want that list. We want to know whether they've registered with us. We want to know whether they've submitted their RCR, which is your risk compliance return. We want to know, recently the FIC asked to please upload your RMCPs. We want to know whether they've uploaded their RMCPs. So just on the basis that you're not registered and you don't have an RMCP, they know that. They issue administrative sanctions and fines. That's without you being able to state your side of the story, if that makes sense. And we have had, since the beginning of the year, multiple accountable institutions that just got issued with fines. Sure. I think the FIC is at a stage where there's real pressure on them. They've upped their compliance and enforcement immeasurably. since last year because of the pressure. We're on the grey list and we need to get off.
So, no, thanks for that. That's very insightful. So, I mean, what are some of the fundamental purposes of the FIC Act?
So the FICT Act is essentially obliged to ensure that we are able to slot into the FATF requirements. So sufficient means to combat money laundering, sufficient means within accountable and in the financial sector to combat terrorist funding and proliferation financing, which is massive weapons of mass destruction. Sufficient means to be able to identify beneficial ownership. That's a recent thing. We only really got up to speed with that now, or trying to. I don't know if you remember, but there was a big push a couple of years ago, especially from the CIPC, where you register your companies, to say, look, you have until a certain time to not only put up your directors with us, but also your beneficial owners. We want to know where the money ends in terms of the company. So that essentially is a fixed task to create this framework for accountable institutions, so that accountable institutions take responsibility and essentially get to a place where they understand the business they're in, understand their clients, able to identify the clients, able to report on suspicious transactions. And that's the fixed purpose. The unfortunate reality is all accountable institutions play an integral role. I'm an attorney. I can give you a sale of purchase agreement, and you can use that agreement for 10 times when you sell your house. The RMCP, and I see a lot of guys copying and pasting from mates or colleagues when it comes to the RMCP, but the RMCP is a very personalized foundation of combating money laundering and terrorist funding, being able to do customer due diligence and the necessary screenings. And it's something personal to your business. Someone else cannot do it for you unless they physically sit with you and say, look, tell me your services, tell me your products, so we can establish and we can create this plan so that you can mitigate your risk, you can assess your risk, identify the risk, mitigate the risk, and manage it. And everything is covered in your RMCP. So it can't be a cut and copy exercise. When the FIC comes to your business, they want to know that you understand your obligation in terms of being able to identify your risk, being able to do the risk ratings, understanding your product, understanding your services, where your risks lie, how are you going to mitigate them. They want to see that you're doing active training on FIC legislation as well as on your RMCP. So it's very critical. I always say it's rather bite the bullet and go educate yourself, because you're going to live with this thing for the rest of your professional or your commercial career. That is the reality. Stop trying to avoid it. Register with the FIC and get to a place where you are considered compliant.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is the RMCP doesn't matter what size business you are, whether you're a small business to a large enterprise. This FIC Act and the anti-money laundering is affecting everyone, big and small.
Absolutely. There's no notion that because I'm small, or I know there's a lot of micro lenders on, or because I'm a micro lender and I've got one business, or I operate from one premises and I give out 100 loans or 50 loans a month, this has got nothing to do with me. That's unfortunately not the case. Big, small, doesn't matter the industry. If you are an accountable institution in terms of Schedule 1 of the FICT Act, you need to comply. And registration is crucial. Creating and developing your RMCP, or risk management compliance program, is crucial. Understanding it is absolutely fundamental. The nice thing about the FIC is they have all the tools available on the website. And by tools, I mean written guidelines on, guys, this is what you need to keep in mind when you are structuring your RMCP. This is what we want when we are looking at screening, customer due diligence. This is how you need to assess risk and put together your risk matrix. Very, very, very important to. And people always come to us and say, look, we're going to sit back and we're going to push it onto you guys to do whatever is necessary. It's really not the sound way to do it. You're going to unfortunately need to educate yourself and understand, but why am I doing this? Why do I have customer due diligence? Why do I have a risk rating in respect of my services? Why do I have to assess risk? Why do I have to put measures in place? What does those measures look like? And how can I structure my business to ensure that I have all the necessary things in place to combat money laundering and terrorist funding? And so unfortunately, you're going to need to get stuck in and say, let me visit the FIG website and let me read up about the RMCP. Let me read up about customer due diligence. I know the guys in the financial sector is also very aware of this KYC term, which is know your client. And that's exactly what the FIG expects of you. Understand your business, understand where the risk lies, understand who you're doing business with, understand what transactions are prevalent in your business, understand the risk in terms of those transactions. And if you see anything funny, sorry, I'm calling it funny, but if you see anything strange or funny, you have an obligation to report. Maybe on reporting, if you do not report those transactions and those suspicious behaviors, and you're obliged to report, or if you somehow seem to be involved in assisting with money laundering or terrorist financing, apart from the administrative sanctions, you will be going to jail. It's a criminal act, up to 15 years. And on the criminal side of things, you can also be issued with a fine. So it's crucial. We're never going to not be part or not be a member of FATF. We're never going to not want to or need to conform with those international standards. We want to be able, South Africa wants to be able to engage in that level. We want to be seen as having a sound financial market. So crucial, absolutely crucial.
Okay. So what are the essential screenings that must be completed before engaging on any transactions or relationships with the client?
So, and again, there are guys that say, look, I do small, for instance, micro loans. I do 1,000 Rand a month. I do single transactions. Just so by the way, the FIG says micro lending is not a single transaction. You want that client to come back to borrow again. Those are seen as business relationships. And maybe we need to touch on the difference between the two. So the fundamental principle is the FIG says you have an obligation to know who you're dealing with. If you're accountable institution, there's no scenario that exists where you can do business anonymously. So with small transactions and single transactions, which something like a micro lending is not, transactions, for instance, less than 5,000 Rand, that's a single transaction. You don't expect the customer to come back. You will do simplified customer due diligence. So you need to be able to identify the person you're dealing with. So important when the FIG comes to you, they want to know, do you know who you've dealt with? Do you have name, surname, ID number, etc.? But when it comes to business relationship or transactions bigger than 5,000 Rand, the FIG says now you need to up it a bit. And it can go into a space where it's enhanced due diligence, where you have, for instance, dealing with PEPs or PIPs, and you have now assessed and you've done your RMCP and say, look, I'm going to regard a PEP or a PIP, and I think we're going to get to that later, as a medium or high risk. Then the FIG says you have a business relationship, you need to do proper due diligence. So this is not identification, this is verification. I need to verify the identity given to me. I need to verify that against a reliable source, which will be the Department of Home Affairs. I need to get source of funds. I need to be able to identify where's the residence of this person. I need to be able to say, is this person a politically exposed person, a PEP? Is this person a political influential person? And then always very important, sanction screening against the TFS list. Very, very important. You always have to screen against the sanction list. So when a person is a PEP or a PIP, or in terms of your risk mating, a person is a medium or a high risk, you can still do business with that person. It just means I need to look after them carefully. I need to do ongoing due diligence, and I continuously need to know what is my relationship with this person. And if it changes, I've got a reporting obligation. But sanctions is always a must. We need to screen against sanctions. Very, very, very important. It's a TFS list, a targeted financial sanctions list. If there's a proposed transaction and someone is on the sanction list, it's a no-no. You do not conclude that transaction, and you have immediate responsibility or a responsibility to immediately report that transaction to the FIC. Before I forget, sorry, Keith, it's so important because this is coincidentally also something that carries a criminal prosecution. That is, under no circumstances, when you have a reporting obligation, can you tell that customer or that person that you have an obligation to report or that you will report.
I see.
You need to report. The FIC then needs to do investigation. They look into this transaction. But you cannot give anyone the so-called heads up and say, look, you've now come to me and with this suspicious behavior or wanting to do this transaction. I've known you for a long time. This is not how we've always done business. I'm going to need to report you. You cannot do that. So the FIC reporting requirement is no heads up to your customer in regards to the relationship. You report the transaction to the FIC. Very, very important.
No, thanks for that. And just, I mean, we spoke about the PEPs and the PIPs, but why are they so important? I think you've really touched on them, but why is it important to identify them?
So the very short answer would be that a politically exposed person would be a person in government, and their connections and their family members. A politically influential person would be someone that does contracting with government on a certain scale. So very simplified breakdown of the two, so that is understandable. The short reality is corruption is more prevalent in that environment. So the FIC says when you are dealing with that type of person, know already that there might already be a risk attached to that transaction and to that relationship. Monitor that relationship. Very important. If something is out of the ordinary, report that relationship or transaction. So that's essentially why it's important that there's also screenings against those databases. Very, very important, especially when you have a business relationship. It is a must. And then in accordance with your RMCP, you'll have an obligation to identify, assess, and monitor and manage this relationship and services you provide. Within your program, you will say, this type of transaction or this type of person is a low risk. This type of person is a medium risk, and this type of person is a high risk. And you will deal with that category in different ways. You might feel the need to do your PEP and your identity verification PEP and PIP with your high-risk clients on a 3-monthly basis, on a 6-monthly basis, to ensure that you are compliant when it comes to continuous due diligence in the enhanced space. So those screenings and that knowledge which you need to obtain, very, very crucial.
And before I come to you, because I just want to wrap this up, Arno, with you, is how do regulatory bodies such as the FSCA, SARB, and FIC shape expectations around AML compliance in South Africa?
So there's so much interaction and communication from them, which we need to applaud. And I think one needs to understand that the pressure that exists behind them on a national level to get South Africa to a place where we conform to international standards. But essentially, the FIC creates a framework. And the FIC says, I need assistance to enable financial institutions to be sound and the financial market to be sound. I need assistance. And that assistance comes from supervisory bodies like the FSCA, Financial Sector Conduct Authority, which essentially looks at market conduct. So FSCA may launch an investigation in terms of non-compliance with FIC. So can the FIC do it. Coincidentally, we read that one administrative penalty. They divvy it up. They say administrative penalty issued by supervisory bodies like the FSCA or the Reserve Bank, when it comes to banks and institutions they regulate. And then it also says administrative sanctions and penalties issued by the FIC themselves. And I urge people to scroll around on the FIC's website and look at it. Look how many penalties and sanctions have been issued just in the last month from the FIC itself. And compare that coincidentally, or compare that to the same period last year, and you'll see there's a dramatic difference. To put it lightly, I think the FIC is getting to a place where they are now saying, we have warned enough, we have tried to educate, we have pleaded, we have immense pressure on ourselves. Accountable institution now needs to stand up, take accountability, take responsibility, and get to a place where we are compliant.
No, thanks for that. I'm going to be coming right back to you, Arno, just now. So let us know in the Q&A section what your biggest AML challenge in your organization that you're currently navigating. Let's now explore what risks actually look like on the field beyond policy, right? So I just want to touch on something with you, Vickers, and this is right in your wheelhouse, right? What are some of the integration challenges financial institutions face when trying to implement screening with their legacy systems?
Legacy systems, obviously they weren't geared for this legislation. But the main thing that we need to look at, and there's one thing that I've touched on, is that the RCP plan is very unique to each and every business. So in the systems which we've done at the moment is we've made it very configurable. That a client can go and look at what is his specific RCP plan needs, and from there on you have the option for your ID verification. We've got the option for your paper PIP. You've got your option for your whitelisting. Now, what the challenge of that is, obviously, it's just the training in-house in your businesses, that your clients and yourself, and obviously the staff that manage the systems day to day, understand exactly what they need and how the system works. Now, the nice thing with that though is the system has all the tools for you to be compliant. You just need to decide, okay, this is what my RMCP plan needs from me, and you follow from there. The system there will actually look at your scoring for you. It will tell you when a client has to have some extra due diligence to do for you. So there's all those little tweaks that you can make it that is specifically geared for you. And that obviously then sorts out our challenge that we have with physical training with your staff in branch. That obviously is going to mitigate your risk if your staff is understanding what you need to do.
So how frequently should organizations review their customer profiles and risk scores? Can this process effectively be automated?
Yes, at the moment. So again, you will always refer back to your RMCP plan. The RMCP plan will tell you from a specific client's perspective what needs to be done, when should it be done, per week, per month, every 3 months, every 6 months. So the system is configurable where you will go and look at it, and there's a setup in the back end where you will do all those kind of back end setups for you. And obviously, as FinTech, we can assist with those settings and all those challenges on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So coming back to you, Arno, just to wrap this up, is like what practical risks of missing or failing to report suspicious transactions or activities?
So it's a massive risk. And the risk, I think, is essentially threefold. We already touched on it. But it is not only a reputational risk, and definitely reputational risk. which one need to be fully aware of. But it has a potential of crippling a business. Accounts being freezed by the banks, and we've mentioned the administrative sanctions and the penalties. We've mentioned criminal liability. Remember, the FIC is not in a space to go out and evaluate transactions. It can do and it does it proactive investigations, and it comes to your business and it looks at it, etc., etc. But FIC is reliant on us to report those transactions so that they can investigate those transactions. If there's no transactions being reported to them, they have an issue to answer with FATF. It's like, guys, but where are you looking into these transactions? You can't tell me these transactions are not happening. So they are reliant on us, an accountable institution, to say, I've had this business relationship with a client. The client always engages in this type of service. Client always pays in this way, in this manner. I had this client suddenly rock up to my business with 100,000 rand in a briefcase. Like the client very much. Do I have an obligation to report it as a suspicious transaction? Absolutely. The FIC is reliant on us to clean up the financial sector and to ensure that there's no engagement in money laundering and terrorist funding. So we have a big obligation. And the reality is, if we're not going to play our role, essentially you're looking at closure of your business. And I might be seen to be a bit dramatic, but I've looked at last night, funny enough, about the fines issued against attorneys. And these are small firms. I don't have necessarily a big firm, but these are small firms, and the fines are substantial. These are fines capable of closing a business.
Sure.
And the reality is, and as I've mentioned, we have now been forewarned, we have been warned, we have been pleaded, and the FIC, the general approach by the FIC is, and let's take microlenders. Microlenders, fairly new to the fray of accountable institutions. The FIC, and especially last year, their approach was, guys, let's educate, let's assist these financial or these accountable institutions. They are fairly new to the fray. Let's help them get to a place where they're compliant. But this was last year and the year before. It's now been a long time where we need to get to a space where we are compliant. So essentially, the FIC's getting a bit fed up with the non-compliance. And we are seeing a massive increase in penalties and fines in that space. And again, I can't emphasize this more, but whether you're a one-man band or whether you're a massive organization, if you're an accountable institution, you have this compliance obligation. And you're not going to be left in the dark or skipped because you sit in a small corner somewhere in South Africa and no one knows where you operate from or where you are. They will get to you because they have this obligation to get South Africa to a place where they can get off the grey list, where we can get back to a place where we are seen as a jurisdiction where people can invest money, where people can trust our financial system and the integrity of our financial structures and of our financial system. And I only see it that it's going to get increasingly prevalent. It's going to get increasingly to a place where there are big pressure on everyone to get to a place where they are compliant. And that pressure is going to come from your supervisory bodies. That pressure is going to come from the FIC itself.
Oh, thanks. Very insightful. So, Wikus, can API-driven systems like Altron FinTech's switching platform simplify these compliance processes?
Oh, definitely. I think that's the aim of most of our offerings that we give to our clients. And what we're talking about on AML at the moment, we're aiming at simplicity. Compliance is always a pain, and if it's a lot of legwork to get compliant, it's almost like some people want to take the easy way out, which we want to give it an easier way to do the right thing. So all our systems, we are aiming it to make sure it's simplistic, that everybody can understand it. Because these things are big words sometimes being said here, then you feel that yourself, oh, you have to handle these kind of things. But with the systems here, we can make it so simple and easy to have your compliance in the systems available. That's the main drive we've got at FinTech.
Brilliant. So what does fit for purpose RMCP look like in practice, especially for a microfinance or a fintech setup?
Okay, so FinTech setup, again, I'm going to go back through to your RMCP plan. Very unique to a business. So Arno touched on it earlier that you can't go and copy and paste somebody else or one of your friends in the business that you can go and take one of their RMCP plans and just go and work it around. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. You have to look and speak to a specialist, get your RMCP plan exactly for your system. And then that's where our system comes in, where we can take all the data you've got there and get it into a configurable setup for you. That is basically plug and play almost. Nothing is always plug and play. There's also some human interaction that you have to do. But you will have your scoring on there. You will tell you exactly when you have to do an IDV. Tell you when you have to do a PEP and PIP, when a screening has to happen, all those things. So you can have your consultants that actually helping the system easily identify when certain things need to happen. Because it is complex. Some things are complex, but we need to make it as simple as possible for our consumers.
Oh, thanks for that. So let's take a moment and zoom out and compare how AML plays out across different sectors. Okay. So if I come to you, Arno, how do AML, PEP, and PIP risks differ between banks, fintechs, insurers, and retailers?
So the difference is vast. And the difference is vast because of the nature of each of those businesses. So each of those businesses would assess and say, what is it that I do? Where does my risk lie? What do I need to mitigate that risk? What do I need to manage that risk? And how will I be doing my customer due diligence to ensure that I'm capable of doing those things? So each business will vastly differ. And maybe just to latch on what was said earlier, if I go back to the early 2000s or even late 90s, when us as attorneys had to onboard clients, I mean, that was essentially nothing. I remember in the late 90s, I was involved in it. I don't want to say involved, that sounds bad. But I had a client that wanted to put money into our trust account, and it was a massive amount of money. And we asked the client, we're gonna need to say where you got the funds. And the client just simply said, look, it's none of your business. Which created a bit of tension and ruptions. But funny enough, when you look at our industry, if I compare 10 years ago to now, how long it takes us to onboard a client because of our risk, our RMCP, and the hoops we need to jump through, and the questions we need to ask clients, which a lot of times are uncomfortable questions, especially when it comes to beneficial ownership, where we do not have a lot of the times the luxury that you guys have created, whereby if you take a bit of time, you develop your RMCP and you get it together and you're able to plug into a system like this, it saves time. And I think that's the crucial thing.
Yes.
We've checked in our business, it takes about 30 to 45 minutes to onboard a new client, provided that they supply us with the information we want immediately. And I know your system, when it comes to micro lending, once everything is set up and you're in a space where you can now do business and you're comfortable, you know my RMCP is in, then the rules within the system speaks to my RMCP. I'm capable of doing continuous due diligence and enhanced due diligence. It's much easier in the micro lending in the fintech environment with, for instance, what it is for us. And I think that's a massive benefit. But very important, go through the foundation work. These, can I call it plug and plays, or these APIs, whatever the case may be, is only helpful when you have the necessary foundation. When you've gone through the effort to say, I'm gonna be compliant when it comes to my RMCP. I'm going to ensure that my staff knows what it's all about. I'm going to ensure that they get the requisite training. I've done my staff screening, very important. All staff members need to be screened as well. FIG deals specifically with that in terms of a PCC, so very important that we do staff screenings as well. And I think your system is capable of doing that that also very important. So that plug and play or API would be absolutely beneficial and will be able to cut down the time that it takes, for instance, us to do onboarding of a client. I think with you guys, it's capable of doing it within a couple of minutes or possibly even less because everything is automated once you have the foundation set up. But maybe to get back to those sectors, vastly different because fee compliance is an introspective conduct that needs to happen or assessment that needs to happen to say, I'm a bank, this is where my risk lies. Or I'm a financial service provider, this is where my risk lies. This is my type of client, this is my type of transaction. I have identified, I have assessed, I've mitigated, I've created my risk matrix. I'm capable of now ensuring that every transaction falls within my risk rate, matrix. There's a risk assessment, all the screenings happy with your system. Happily, it happens in the background. The screenings are being done. It creates a profile to say this client is a low, medium, or high risk, and then, if I understand it correctly, it happens once that has been created or identified. It happens on an automatic basis. And again, for us, it's different. Every 6 months, I need to sit with my high-risk clients, and I need to do due diligence and verifications and everything again. So with a system, I can assume it's much more easier and simpler. But again, that foundation is very important. But every business is different. Every business is different.
Sure. And I mean, as we're talking about different businesses, how do informal economies or cash-heavy environments, comply with this ML enforcement? What advice would you have?
They're probably not that compliant, and that's also where a big risk lies in those environments. So I think that's where a big challenge lies. To get to a place where those transactions and those environments are transparent, very important. So there is a big risk in that sector, which is creating a bit of a problem. And the reality is, because it is that environment, it's not easy to be able to penetrate that environment and say, guys, but this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to operate. Because it's so much informal and in the informal space. So transparency not really prevalent there. And again, very important that us as a country get to a place where we say there's simplified and simple systems available. Come into the, I don't want to say formal fray, but come into the fray. We are able to assist in putting those necessary systems and the checks and balances and your RMCPs and everything together, so that we can start doing our part to ensure financial stability and financial compliance.
Thanks for that. So coming back to you, Wikus, but let's end all of this with a forward perspective. I'll turn back to you now to say, what role will rapid payments and PayShap play in the future of the AML strategy?
Well, I think the tools that is going to be there, it's going to be easier to trace transactions at the end of the day, better auditing for transactions, because there's full-on transactional reporting on the back end of any of those financial transactions. I think that's the main one where we can really think of every transaction that's going to happen through the systems. You've got an audible and you've got a reporting structure that's already available for it. And secondly, it's PCID compliant already. So all the security is in place for those transactions. And then obviously just peace of mind for our consumers, that they know every financial transaction that runs through the system, we can trace. Secondly, as well, with those specific ones, it is a cashless situation. So all those transactions, when you make those funds available, is a financial transaction that you can audit and see straight away.
So is South Africa moving towards a more collaborative compliance model, like shared utilities or consortiums?
Definitely, yes. In the last few years, there's a few changes that happened in the fintech space, and just with different partners having workshops together, getting that collaborative ecosystems running from the system. So most of the times, just to get the payment system modernization that is happening at this point, that we've got a few of our role players that's in there from our business sector, from our development side as well. Now, that's obviously, you have to have some leaders in those situations that know where we want to go and obviously the expertise. So yes, we've got that. There's a big things happening in that space.
And then how do you see AML regulation and FIC Act compliance evolving over the next 3 to 5 years? I'm also going to give you a chance to answer that same question.
I think, what I always see in those kind of things, and that's what any system development, we need volumes. So when volumes runs through systems, that's when you can really amend and enhance certain aspects of it. So I think in the next 3 to 4 years, or actually in the next 3 years, as soon as that volumes really comes in and the people are really starting to get compliant, then we're going to see where we can enhance the systems, make it speedier, make it more simplistic, that you can always have a full automated system. And I think another thing that would be nice at the moment, obviously, is there's no interaction between certain systems and the FIC reporting side. It's also a little bit of a manual process. So I think the main thing that we want from there is where systems can have APIs that connect through to the FIC reporting side, that you can automatically report it from there and not have to break out of your current credit management system or whatever system you're using. You can do it from that side. So that's what I see in the next 3 to 5 years in that space.
Thanks for that, Vickers. Asking you the same question, Arno.
Vickers basically said it, but what I think we need to understand is that the financial landscape is complex, and I think you guys especially know that. If you just look at the laws and the pieces of legislation that the likes of you guys need to comply with, so it's ever evolving. It's moving way quicker than any other space. If you just look at the legislation and the amendments that's coming out in that space. We've recently had the big shuffle of the Twin Peaks model that's now in existence. So gear for it, and that's the reality. Make peace with it. Get to a space where you are comfortable, and it doesn't detract from your business. Continuously fighting against it is not going to be the answer, and you're going to end up being reactive to a bunch of regulators instead of saying, look, let's take time, let's be proactive, and let's get to a place where we are compliant. But it's moving fast. Because of the international pressure we have, it is only going to increase. The scrutiny is only going to increase. And that is the reality. If I compare last year to this year, it's already been a dramatic increase. When you look at the supervisory bodies, the proactive investigations that's going on. And I think when we look to next year, we're going to have a further increase.
No, thank you. We've covered a lot. So now it's time to hear from you. Do we have any questions on our Q&A?
Morning, Keith. Yes. The first question posted here comes from Nazneen. We're a smaller institutions. How do we practically balance AML compliance with limited resources and a limited budget? Vickers?
Well, I think, let's hand over to systems. Yes, it is an initial investment that you are going to do there. So yes, there is going to be some extra costs for a small SME, but I think in the long run, if you just look and heard about some of those fines, and I don't want to be the person that brings that always up, but that's the challenge that you're going to have. So yes, some initial investment costs is going to happen, but the seamlessness from the systems that you're going to implement is going to, in long run, it's going to have a positive effect on your business. You're going to know your client, you're going to risk your mitigating is going to be better. And obviously you're not going to have any issues with any of the regulated bodies. So I think that is more the way you have to look at it from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And obviously driving those efficiencies within the system from a systems perspective, right? At the end of the day, if your system's not working for you, it's working against you. This one comes from Anonymous, Arno. And it says...
Always afraid of anonymous.
So this one says, how will the FIC know if I'm not registered with the FIC that I even exist?
Well, if you're registered with the FSCA or with the NCR, the FIC are most certainly busy with those interactions and the other regulatory bodies. They will definitely get to know you. Let me make this example. Last year, December, we had a client, fairly small, Pawn, Pawn, I think. Hopefully the spelling is correct. But pawn business, very, very small. Sat with the person, said, look, we understand this is problematic, but you unfortunately going to need to get to a space where your RMCP is in. We've registered with the FIC, and he said, look, I'm doing 5-6 transactions a month. There's no ways that the FIC is going to pick up on me. This was December around the 10th. The 22nd of January, I think, or the 23rd of January, he just got a sanction notification from FIC. So, look, we know who you are. We've checked you against it. You are registered with the National Credit Regulator. You're not registered with us. We don't know anything about you. You ought to have already been registered with us. You ought to already have an RMCP in place. You ought to have submitted your risk and compliance return. None of that's happened. Here's your fine. You got 7 days to pay it. Unfortunately, you have an obligation to comply. Get to a space where you are compliant. There's now so many avenues one can get help from. And we're sitting here with you guys today. That's capable of sending someone the right direction to say, get this assistance, or look at the FIC's website when it comes to guidelines on how to structure your RMCP, or go see this person, or link into our system to say, let's get you to a space with minimal effort. Let's get you to a space where you are compliant. But the bottom line is, Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. Anonymous, that you will get caught out. And I've said before, the ostrich sticking the head in the sand is simply not, it's not going to work. And we have those examples. If I just see how many people we've had to assist who has had those directives and sanctions from the FIC to say, get your house in order now, it's a massive amount since January. Get to a space where you are compliant, and you need to play your part in the broader picture. That's also important.
Yeah, 100% can't agree with you more. So another question coming in is, there are so many different platforms and compliances and things that we have to adhere to, stick to, and make sure that we are doing things right. The cost of doing business in this industry has become very, very high. It is very, very expensive, and it's becoming higher all the time. We've had no increase in our fees and so forth. Is there any indication that there might be some reprieve for us, or something coming back our way?
Hoping you're going to get to it. So the short answer is no, unfortunately not. And I assume you're specifically referring to the microlending industry and the NCA compliance, or the compliance with the National Credit Act, with regards to fees in that respect. So we are fairly close to the ground. Unfortunately, I know they are busy looking into it. They have been busy for quite some time. But there's nothing substantial on the cards yet when it comes to the increase in your initiation fee and your service fee and the interest that you can charge. So, yes, compliance has a cost to it. Unfortunately, it's not something that you can avoid. What I can tell you, non-compliance has got a far greater cost to it, where it actually jeopardizes your business being closed down, if I look at the sanctions being issued lately. But hopefully we will get there. I know there's a lot of lobbying going on in that respect. So hopefully we get to a place where we can have sustainable businesses when it comes to income versus compliant costs and other costs businesses have. So I'm hopeful we will get to a place where we sit with proper sustainable businesses, especially in the credit provision industry.
Thank you. Another question that just came in is, would a municipal councillor be classified as a PIP, particularly in the microlending space, where they come to you for a loan, a low-value loan and so forth? Would those people be classified and qualified under this category?
Be classified as a PEP. Yes, they would be. So they might not necessarily be automatically high risk. Again, it depends on how you have gone through the process of creating your RMCP, and it depends on the transaction and a few other factors. But yes, so and maybe to elaborate a bit on that, it depends on so many issues. Whether I'm operating close to the border, whether I'm operating close to a port, that influences your risk rating of your customer. If I have a customer in Durban, it would be different to having a customer in Joburg. If I have a customer up north, it would be different to having a customer in Bloemfontein. So there are, and I've maybe, hopefully, not oversimplified things, but I also don't want to scare everyone off by saying it's this massive, abstract, and complicated a scenario which you need to get a hold of. If you take the time and simply go through what's on the FIGS website in guidelines and guidance notes and directives, you will easily be able to get to a place where to say, look, this is not that massive of a mountain. And having the likes of you guys with regards to system in the background, giving me ability to ensure that I maintain compliance, I mean, you're capable of getting there. And I think that's the most important thing.
Then another one here is I have to train all of my staff up with all of these rules and regulations and everything. But if I don't know all the rules, how do I get trained up to train them?
Short answer is know all the rules. But again, you also have consultants and I suppose attorneys in that space that can assist. But please be very sure when the FIC comes to you, they're going to ask for a logbook. They're going to say, I want to know when have you trained your staff and when is your next training session on two issues, on FIC compliance in general and on your RMCP. So staff needs to get training in respect of those two aspects. Very, very important. And we've also mentioned staff screenings that needs to take place. Again, there's a specific PCC which deals with it. So my bottom answer to those type of questions is always educate yourself a bit, but there's definitely help out there. Absolutely. So get the help. Very, very important.
No, thank you. Thank you to our speakers, Arno Bosch from Bosch and Murray's attorneys, and Vickers Bed from Altron FinTech. Thank you for sharing your invaluable insights, and to all that have joined us today. As we have explored, AML compliance is no longer a back office function. It's a frontline defense. Whether you're in microfinance, fintech, traditional banking, the stakes are high, but so are the opportunities for innovation and collaboration. Let's continue to build a compliant, transparent, and trusted financial ecosystem in South Africa. If you've got any further questions, please do reach out to us, Altron FinTech, for your screening solutions. Feel free to reach out at any time and our team will be there to support you. Until next time, stay informed, stay compliant, and stay ahead.